Before the world called him the greatest, before his fists became thunder and his words became fire, there was just a boy named Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. running through the streets of Louisville, Kentucky. No flashing cameras, just a dream burning louder than the noise around him. He wasn't born into comfort. He wasn't born into fame. He was born into a world that told him who he could not be. A world divided by color, by class, by expectation. But Ali, even as a child, refused to bow to what the world said was possible. He once said, "I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion." That wasn't just a quote, it was prophecy. At 12 years old, someone stole his bike. That moment changed history. He stormed into a police station, furious, saying he wanted to whoop whoever took it. The officer, Joe Martin, told him, "You better learn how to fight first." And from that spark, destiny began. A tiny gym surrounded by sweat, noise. A boy found his calling. He didn't just train to fight. He trained to rise. He was fast, too fast. He moved like poetry. His rhythm wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. He said later, "I am the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was." And that line wasn't arrogance, it was faith. Because faith to Ali was the engine of greatness. Every punch, every step, every round. He wasn't just fighting opponents. He was fighting a system. A system that said a black man from Kentucky couldn't be the face of glory. He didn't fight hate with hate. He fought it with pride, with words sharper than any jab. Because Muhammad Ali didn't just throw punches, he threw truth. When he entered the Olympics in 1960, he was as a symbol waiting to be born. He won gold in Rome, smiling that electric smile, standing tall while the anthem played. And when he came home, expecting respect, he found the same. He falls at the spading walls. There's the same stairs, the same America divided by color lines and fear. That sting of injustice burned into him deeper than any glove ever could. He threw that medal into the Ohio River, not out of anger, but out of awakening. He realized that medals don't mean freedom. Titles don't mean dignity, and applause doesn't mean truth. And that was the first transformation. Cassius Clay started to fade, and Muhammad Ali began to emerge. A man of faith, a man of conviction, a man who would never again let the world define his worth. He studied, listened, and questioned. He joined the Nation of Islam, changed his name, and then embraced his new identity with unshakable pride. He said, "I am America. I am the part you won't recognize, but get used to me, black, confident, cocky, my name not yours, my religion yours." That statement sent shockwaves through a country unready for a man who refused to apologize for his existence. He was more than an athlete, he was a revolution wrapped in muscle and poetry. Reporters mocked him, critics called him arrogant, politicians called him dangerous. But Ali didn't care, because truth doesn't beg for approval. He walked into rooms knowing he didn't just belong there, he deserved to be there. And every time he spoke, people listened, even the ones who claimed to hate him. He was magnetic, charismatic, fearless, because he didn't just talk about greatness, he embodied it. By the time he stepped into the ring with Sonny Liston, the world expected him to fall. They said he was too pretty, too loud, too soft. But Ali understood something most people never do, that greatness isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving your spirit right. He danced, he dodged, he floated like a whisper and struck like lightning. And when Liston fell, the world realized The boy from Louisville had become something more than a boxer. He had become a force. That night, under the hot lights, as cameras flashed and history froze, Ali stood above his opponent and shouted to the world, I am the greatest! I shook up the world! He did, not because of the win, but because of what it represented. For the first time, a black man stood on the global stage, proud, unafraid and unbroken, and made the world watch. Ali's story was never just about boxing. It was about breaking stereotypes, breaking limits, breaking silence. He was the voice of those who had been told to stay quiet. He was the movement that refused to sit still, and every word, punch, every victory carried a message far beyond the ring, that your belief in yourself can defy any system built to keep you down. He wasn't just fighting opponents in gloves, he was fighting history itself. The world thought they knew Muhammad Ali after that night, the young champion who danced like wind and spoke like thunder. But that was only the beginning, because the fight that would define him wasn't fought in the ring. It was fought in the court of public opinion. It was fought in the streets, in the headlines, in the soul of America itself. Ali had become heavyweight champion of the world. Yet, outside the ropes, he was walking into a different kind of battle. In 1967, at the height of his fame, the US government called him to fight in Vietnam, and the whole world waited to see what he would do. But Ali did something most men, most champions would never dare. He said no, not out of fear, not out of cowardice, but out of conscience. He stood in front of microphones and said words that shook a nation. I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. No Viet Cong ever called me the N-word. That sentence wasn't just a refusal. It was rebellion. A truth too heavy for many to hear, because in those words, he wasn't just rejecting war, he was rejecting hypocrisy. He was calling out a country that asked him to fight for freedom abroad, while denying it to his own people at home. They called him unpatriotic. They stripped his title. They banned him from boxing. They tried to erase him from the sport he built with his blood. But Ali didn't break. He said, I would rather face prison than betray my faith. He stood still while the storm tried to drown him. His house emptied. His income vanished. But his faith, his conviction grew stronger in those years of silence. When he was forbidden from fighting, he became something greater than a champion. He became a symbol, a voice for the voiceless, a reminder that standing for something comes with a price. Ali could have folded. He could have apologized, signed the papers, gone back to glory, but he refused. Because greatness without integrity, he believed, is emptiness. He said once, oh, I know where I'm going and I know the truth. And I don't have to be what you want me to be. I'm free to be what I want. That was the essence of Muhammad Ali. Not the muscles, but the courage to live free. When he spoke, you could feel the weight of generations in his words. He wasn't just a boxer anymore. He was a preacher of purpose, a prophet of pride. And every interview, every debate, every headline made one truth clear. Ali was not fighting to be liked. He was fighting to be heard. 3 years passed. No fame, just faith. He trained in silence, spoke in colleges, challenged minds instead of men. And little by little, the world began to change. What was once seen as arrogance began to look like strength. What was once called defiance began to look like dignity. People began to understand he wasn't against America. He was against the injustice within it. When the Supreme Court finally overturned his conviction in 1971, Ali walked free. Not just legally, but spiritually. He had proven something few ever could. That even when you lose everything, you still win if you never betray your truth. But when he returned to boxing, he's no longer the same man. The world had changed. The war had scarred the nation. Ali had grown not older, but deeper. His body had slowed, but his spirit had become sharper, stronger, unstoppable. He was no longer just fighting for belts or pride. He was fighting for meaning. Every jab, every round was a sermon, a message that conviction beats circumstance. That even if you strip a man of everything, you cannot strip him of his soul. He once said, "He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life." That wasn't just his motto, it was his life's blueprint. Muhammad Ali didn't risk his career, he sacrificed it. He gave up millions, gave up years of his prime, just to stand on the side of truth. And in doing so, he became more than a legend, he became a lesson to athletes, to leaders, to every human being who's ever faced the choice between comfort and conviction. Ali showed the world that greatness is not measured in titles. It's measured in what you're willing to lose for what you believe. When he finally returned to the ring, people wondered if he still had it. The speed, the rhythm, the magic. But Ali's greatest weapon was never just his body. It was his mind, his heart, his belief that no man, no system, no army could take his purpose from him. He had been broken down and rebuilt by fire, and now, standing in that ring again, he wasn't just fighting to win back his title. He was fighting to remind the world that truth always comes back stronger. When Muhammad Ali walked back into the ring, the world was watching, not because they believed he could win, but because they wanted to see if the man who defied the system could still defy time. He wasn't the same young kid who floated around Liston. The years of exile had slowed him down. His legs weren't lightning anymore, but his mind, his will, they were sharper than ever. The comeback started in 1970. Ali faced Jerry Quarries, and the crowd roared like they were seeing a ghost come back to life. He danced, he jabbed, he smiled. He wasn't just fighting Quarry, he was fighting history. He won that night, and the world whispered, "The champ is back." But the real test, the mountain he had to climb, had a name: Joe Frazier. They called Smokin' Joe relentless. Brutal, no talk, all fight. Frazier was everything Ali wasn't. Quiet, humble, working class grit. Their rivalry wasn't just about boxing. It was about two Americas, two souls of a divided nation. Ali called himself the people's champion. Frazier said, then I'm the man who's gonna humble the people champion. And on March 8, 1971, the world stopped breathing. They called it the fight of the century. Two undefeated men, two warriors, Madison Square Garden, electric, pulsing, alive. When that bell rang, it was chaos and poetry mixed into one. Ali came out fast, sharp jabs, quick feet, trying to dance like old times. But Frazier kept coming, body shots like thunder, hooks like hammers. Round after round, Ali took punishment he'd never known. He'd been to war in the ring before, but never like this. In the 15th round, Frazier landed that left hook. The punch hurt around the world. Ali went down. The unshakable, touchable, unbeatable Ali on the canvas. He got up. He finished the fight. The decision came. Frazier won. Ali lost. For the first time in his professional life, the man who said he was the greatest had been beaten. And the critics laughed. They said, "It's finished, the mouth is shut, the show is over." But they didn't understand Muhammad Ali Ali was never defined by victory. He was defined by how he handled defeat. He said, I never thought of losing. But now that it's happened, the only thing is to do it right. That's the mindset of a true champion, not to avoid pain, but to use it. So he trained harder, fought smarter, waited patiently, and 3 years later, he'd have his revenge. But before that, there's another storm waiting. 1974 Zaire, the rumble in the jungle. George Foreman, a destroyer, a monster in the ring. Foreman had crushed Frazier in 2 rounds. People feared for Ali's life. Even his fans whispered, "Has too old. Foreman's too strong." But Ali smiled, looked right into the camera and said, "If you think the world was surprised when Nixon resigned, wait till I whip Foreman's behind." That was Ali, fearless even when the odds said otherwise. When the bell rang that night in Kinshasa, the heat was suffocating. Foreman threw bombs, pure power in every punch. But Ali did something no one expected. He leaned back on the ropes. He let Foreman punch again, and the crowd started chanting, "Ali Bey!" That was the birth of the rope-a-dope. Ali absorbed the punishment, let Foreman exhaust himself, then struck with surgical precision. By round 8, Foreman was breathing fire. Ali whispered to him, "Is that all you got, George?" Then came the flurry, left, right. And Foreman collapsed. The referee counted. The arena exploded. The man they said was finished was world cow champion again. He shouted into the mic, "I told you all! I am the greatest. I shook up the world again." But behind the bravado there was something deeper. This wasn't just a victory for a boxer. It was a victory for belief, for patience, for principle. He had gone from exile to glory, from silence to supremacy, all by staying true to himself. Ali's journey wasn't done. There was one more war left, one that would test his body, his soul, and his will to endure pain. The Thriller in Manila. October 1st, 1975. It was more than a fight. It was a war between 2 men who had given everything to the game. By then, both were older, slower, but hungrier than ever. The heat in the arena was unbearable. The closest thing to dying. They hit each other until neither could see straight. Ali said later, "It was the most brutal fight of my life." By the 14th round, both men were beyond exhaustion. Frazier's was swollen shut. Ali wanted to quit. He whispered to his corner, but before they could, Frazier's trainer threw in the towel. Ali had won, barely. And as they cut the gloves off his hands, he collapsed. There was no victory dance, no celebration, just survival. He had given everything, and that night the rivalry ended, not with hatred, but with mutual respect. Because deep down, greatness isn't about beating others. It's about beating yourself, your fear, your fatigue, your doubts. He had gone from champion to outcast to icon, and now he stood on top of the world again, but wiser, humbler, changed. He said, "Man, I've seen too many wars, too much hate. It's time for peace." That's when Muhammad Ali stopped being just a fighter. He became a global symbol of courage, of conscience, of compassion. When the gloves came off after Manila, something inside me changed. People saw me standing there, hand raised, called me the greatest again, but they didn't see what it cost. Every punch I took, every roar I gave, every night I trained till my hands bled, it all left a mark. And for the first time, I started asking myself, what do I do when the fight is over? See, fame is loud, but silence teaches you who you really are. I'd been the loudest man on the planet for over a decade now. I had to learn to listen. After Manila, I knew my body wasn't the same. My speed slowed, my reflexes dulled, but my spirit still burned. And that spirit told me I had more to give than just punches. So I started to travel. Africa, Asia, the Middle East. Wherever I went, people did just see a boxer. They saw hope. Kids came running barefoot, shouting, Ali! Ali. Old men would grab my hands, tears in their eyes, saying, you made us believe we could fight too. And that hit me harder than any punch ever could, because I realized my fights weren't really about boxing anymore. They were about the human spirit, about standing tall when life tries to knock you down. I used to say I'm the greatest. Now I started to understand why. Not because I beat men in the ring, but because I stood up for what I believed in, even when it cost me everything. You see, back in those days, a black man with confidence made people nervous. A black man who spoke truth made people angry. But I didn't care. I said, I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong, because I wasn't fighting their war. I was fighting my own. The war for my soul. And when I came back, after all the years they tried to bury me, the people still stood with me. That's when I realized I didn't just belong to America, I belonged to the world. They called me the people's champion. But really, I was the people's mirror. Their struggle was my struggle. Their faith was my faith. Their pain was my pain. I started visiting refugee camps, hospitals, schools. I met children who had nothing, and they still smiled. That taught me humility. That taught me gratitude. That taught me more than any championship belt ever could. When I saw suffering, I didn't just throw money. I showed up, because showing up matters. And if you ever want to know what legacy really means, let me tell you, it's not the trophies, it's not the fame, it's the footprints you leave on people's hearts. You know, people used to say to me, Ali, what's your secret? And I'd tell them my secret is faith. Faith in God, faith in myself. Faith that everything, the good and bad, happens for a reason. I converted to Islam when the world didn't understand it. People mocked me, called me names, said I'd lost my mind. But Islam gave me peace. It gave me identity. It gave me discipline. It reminded me that this world is temporary, but your soul is forever. And that's what I tried to live by. To show the world that strength doesn't come from violence or ego. It comes from humility, from belief, from the courage to forgive. When I visited Mecca for the first time, I felt something powerful. Standing there among millions of believers, no one cared who I was. Not the champ, just another man bowing before God. That's when I understood the real meaning of equality. And when I came back home, I spoke to America, not as a fighter, but as a man who had seen the world. I told them, we all bleed the same. We all pray for the same things. Peace, dignity, freedom. That message scared some people. But truth always scares the comfortable. That's how you know it's truth. As time went on, I began to slow down even more. My hands trembled, my voice softened, but my conviction never wavered. When the doctor said I had Parkinson's, I smiled and said, God gave me this to remind me I'm human, because you can't fight forever, but you can live with purpose. And that purpose doesn't end when your strength fades, it only deepens. See, I used to think legacy was about immortality, and legacy is about impact. And if I could use my voice, even when it shook, to speak for peace, for faith, for unity, then I was still fighting, just a different kind of fight. And when I lit that Olympic torch in Atlanta in I-96, My hands trembling before the whole world, I knew that moment wasn't about perfection. It was about perseverance. It was about standing tall even when your body tells you to fall. Because that's what being the greatest truly means. Not how loud you shout when you win, but how strong you stand when you're weak. I didn't just fight opponents. I fought fear. I fought doubt. I fought hate. And in the end, I won the only fight that ever really matters, the one against yourself. When I look back at my life, I don't see a perfect man. I see a man who refused to quit, a man who made mistakes, who fell down, who lost, who again and again, because something deep inside told him, your purpose ain't done yet. But I've fought 61 fights in the ring, but hundreds more outside it. The ring taught me how to move my feet, but life taught me how to move hearts. And you know what I realized after all those years? The greatest battles aren't fought with your fists. They're fought with your faith and your conviction and your compassion. You can train your body until it's carved from stone. You can master your mind until no fear touches it. But if you don't have love for yourself, for others, you'll still be empty, because love is the true strength that never fades. People always remember that the lines float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, but I want them to remember something else. Serve like a brother, forgive like a believer, and stand like a man who knows his worth. When I was young, I thought being the greatest meant being better than everyone. It means bringing the best out of everyone around you. It means being brave enough to speak truth, even when your voice shakes. It means carrying yourself with honor, even when no one's watching. It means fighting not for fame, but for freedom, dignity, and respect. You see, legacy isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in silence, in the choices you make when nobody's cheering. When I was banned from boxing for standing up for my beliefs, that was the loneliest time of my life. No crowds, no titles, no cameras, just me, my conscience, and my God. But that's where I found my true self. That's where I learned that the strongest muscle a man has is his heart, not his fists. I learned that courage isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the stillness before the storm. It's the moment you look fear dead in the eye and say, you can't control me. And I want every young person hearing this to remember, your courage is your birthright. Don't ever trade it for comfort, because comfort never made history. Comfort never changed the world. Comfort never stood up to injustice and said, nope. And that's what I hope people understand when they hear my name, that I didn't just fight men. I fought moments when silence was easy but wrong. Moments when calm compromise was safer but cowardly. Moments when truth was dangerous but necessary. I spoke out against war when it wasn't popular. I stood with my faith when people called it strange. I embraced my identity when the world tried to shame it. And every time I did, I paid the price. But I paid it willingly, because freedom always has a cost. And dignity, it was every dollar. If you're listening right now, I want you to think about your own fight, not in a ring, not with gloves, but in your heart. What do you believe in so strongly that you'd stand alone for it? What truth are you willing to protect, even if the whole world turns against you? Because that's what defines you, not your victories, but your values. I used to dream of being remembered as the fastest, the strongest, the greatest boxer alive. But as time went on, my dreams changed. Now I want to be remembered as a man who stood up when it mattered most, as someone who gave people hope, as someone who made others believe that greatness isn't about winning, it's about standing for something bigger than yourself. You see, every man dies, but not every man lives with purpose. I lived through glory and failure, through cheers and silence, through health and illness, and through it all, I never stopped believing that I was put here to do more than just throw punches. I was put here to remind people of their own power. When I met kids in hospitals who were fighting cancer, they didn't see a boxer. They saw someone who refused to quit. And I tell them, this is why we're not going to give up. You're the real champions, because it's not the fight that defines you. It's the courage to keep fighting when you're tired, scared and unsure. To the young ones out there, don't let this world make you small. Don't let fear dictate your future. Don't let hate define your heart. And don't ever think that greatness belongs to somebody else. It's in you. It's in your struggle. It's in your voice. It's in your choice to stand up when it would be easier to kneel down. If my story means anything, it's that greatness isn't given. It's earned by pain, earned by persistence, earned by standing tall even when you're broken. I fought men stronger than me. I faced crowds that booed me, and I endured critics who said I'd fade away. But I didn't fade, I transformed. That's the truth most people don't know. Boxing didn't make me a champion. Life did. Real life will test you harder than any ring ever could. But if you can take those hits, stay humble, stay grateful and keep believing, then my friend, you too will rise. And when you rise, you'll understand what I learned after a lifetime of fighting. That victory isn't when the world applauds you. Victory is when your soul is at peace. You know, when I was young, I used to fear the end. I thought about death like an opponent I couldn't dodge. But as the years passed, I realized something. Death isn't an ending, it's a mirror. It shows you what you lived for. And when I look into that mirror, I see a life that wasn't perfect, but it was full of noise, of faith, of fire, of lessons. I see a man who made people laugh, made them think, made them stand up. I see a man who refused to be silent even when his voice trembled. I used to chase victory. Now I chase peace. And I've learned that true peace doesn't come from trophies, money, or fame. It comes from forgiveness, forgiving others, forgiving yourself, forgiving the world for not always being kind. Because forgiveness is freedom. And I've spent my whole life fighting for that word, freedom. When my body started to fail me, some people looked at me with pity. But I never saw weakness in that. I saw grace. I saw God teaching me a new kind of strength, the kind that doesn't roar, but endures, the kind that smiles through pain, the kind that trusts the plan even when you don't understand it. I've said a lot of things in my life, some loud, some bold, some maybe even foolish. But if there's one truth I'll leave behind, it's this. Every single person listening to me right now, you've got greatness in you. Not just the kind that wins medals, the kind that uplifts others, the kind that forgives, inspires, heals, and loves without fear. Because the measure of a man isn't how much power he has, it's how much light he brings. And light is born in darkness. I had to lose to understand victory. I had to fall to understand faith. I had to grow quiet to understand the power of peace. People still ask me, Ali, what would you say to the young fighters, the dreamers, the next generation? And I'd say this: don't fight for attention, fight for meaning. Don't chase fame, chase purpose, because fame fades, but purpose is eternal. Your gift is not a talent you have, it's the way you use it to lift others higher. I used boxing to tell people you are stronger than you think, but you don't need gloves to fight your battles. You just need faith. Faith that no matter how hard life hits, you can rise again, because the only real defeat is when you stop trying. You see, I was never afraid of losing a fight. I was afraid of losing myself. Afraid of waking up one day and realizing I'd become everything I once stood against. Arrogant, selfish, afraid. So I kept reminding myself, stay humble, stay grounded, stay real, and that's the secret to life, isn't it? To live loud enough to inspire, but quiet enough to listen. I've stood before kings and presidents. I've held gold belts and carried the Olympic torch, but none of that means more than a child smiling when they hear my name. None of it means more than knowing I made people believe they mattered. And one day when I leave this world, I don't want people to just remember the fighter. I want them to remember the human. The man who dared to dream, the man who stood by his faith, the man who spoke his mind even when it cost him everything, the man who turned struggle into strength and hate into hope. When I die, don't mourn for me, celebrate me. Celebrate every fight I fought, every word I spoke, every lesson I left, because I've lived my life like a flame. Bright, burning, wild, and I'd rather burn out in brilliance than fade away in silence. And if my story ever finds you in a moment of doubt, when the world seems heavy, when fear whispers that you're not enough, remember my words, you were born to rise. You were born to shake the ground beneath your feet. You were born to make history. I told the world I was the greatest, and maybe that was destiny talking before I even knew what it meant. Because being the greatest isn't about being perfect. It's about never stopping, never backing down from your truth, never letting the world tell you who you are. It's about having the courage to become the man God intended you to be. So I'll leave you with this. When the crowd is gone, when the cheers fade, when the lights dim and the ring grows silent, what will remain is your soul. Protect it, feed it, fight for it, because that's your legacy, not your victories, not your fame, your soul, how it loved, how it served, how it endured. And when you walk through this life with that truth in your heart, then no matter what happens, you'll always be the greatest.